Illo Talk interviews.
All right, welcome to Illo Talk interviews, and today we have Gazbot. If you could bottle his sweat, you would sell it as pure hustle.
I'm a hustle sweater.
Yeah, so I wanted to have you on because of a number of reasons. But one is that I am doing my first show soon, and I wanted to pick your brain since you do many shows all the time. But also because I'm a huge fan, or a growing fan. I don't know if you can call me a huge fan since I've just recently discovered you in the last little while. But as I've been watching your videos and stuff, one of the things that I really, really like, and I promise this is leading to a question, is the attention to authenticity and detail that you have in your drawings. Like, for example, I was listening to you do an art check with Mike, and you were talking about the specific color during an attack of one of the kaiju that you were drawing of part of his body. And I was like, okay, this is my kind of dude. Because I'm the kind of guy who like geeks out on like, no, that's not how that leaf looks on that tree or whatever. So I want to get started with if you just take a couple minutes, tell me about your journey to where you are now. Have you always wanted to be an artist? Is it something you feel compelled to do? Is it something that you've kind of like fallen into? Is it something that you've, how did you get to this point where you are?
Well, I mean, that could be just like anyone's life story. That could take forever.
Sure.
I will say everything you said, the answer would be yes. Did I just fall into it? Yes. It's something I felt I had to do. Yes. I doodled as a kid, as most kids do, but I didn't take it really seriously until high school. I failed history and gym, physical education, whatever you call it. I was a bad student. I don't think I was a stupid person, but I just didn't pay attention or try. But I always did well in art, and at some point I'm like, well, maybe I should be an artist. It's the only and this was also in the mid 90s when Image was really huge. So I also had this delusion of like, oh, well, there are 19-year-olds becoming millionaires doing comics. So even more, obviously that worked out great, which is why I'm a millionaire. But no, it did not work out great. But I then just had a bunch of retail jobs, and fast forward a little bit, I got a job. I went to art school for a year at the Joe Kubert Art School, which is a comic book art school. I didn't love it there. I learned a little bit, but it was a 3-year program, and I only did the first year. After that, I went to Six Flags, which is a theme park, with a friend of mine who wanted a job as a caricature artist. I was there just to ride the roller coasters. The guy who hired him was a boss of mine. Was a teacher of mine at Joe Kubert, and he said, "Come work doing caricatures for me." I didn't know how, but I knew how to draw, so I did that for a while. I started making a living as a caricature artist. After a few years, somebody there said they were going to school at SVA to get a degree. I said, hey, maybe I should get a degree. So after going to several community colleges and like 10 years, I got a degree in animation from School of Visual Arts in New York. I worked in animation for a while. I worked, I was a production assistant on Venture Brothers, and I worked as an animator on a show called Pinky Dinky Doo, and I worked for MTV. And I had like moderate success in that field. And then, but I kind of wanted to get back to comics and illustration. Ended up moving to California, the West Coast, with my wife because she's in technology. And since I've been out here, I do very little animation. I do much more illustration, freelance kind of stuff. I still do caricatures, but now I do it on the side at parties as opposed to at a theme park. And I started working on my own comic, The Horror A4, and doing art prints and fan art at conventions starting around 8 or 9 years ago, and it's been ramping up since to where it used to be a side thing, and now I do 10, 15 shows a year, and I'm kind of pushing my own work as much as I can while still taking a little bit of client work and still doing a little bit of caricature on the side.
That's awesome. Rough percentages. You don't have to give us actual numbers, but rough percentages. How much of your living is made from e-commerce sales? How much do you think is made from stuff that you're selling at shows? Commissions? Like break that down. I'm always fascinated on how people are doing this.
I haven't broken it down officially, so this is off the top of my head.
Yeah. We're gonna hold you to it. The IRS is in the back watching, so.
Is like 5%, 10%. I do very little in online sales. sales. I have an Etsy store. I do make sales. It seems to come in waves. Around Christmas, holiday times, I sell a bunch. Sometimes after a show, I'll sell a bunch. But generally throughout the year, I'll go months without selling anything on my shop, and then 1 month I'll sell a couple $100. I don't know. Something gets in the air. I do get commissions online sometimes, also in shows. That's maybe 10%. Now, when I say commissions, that means, hey, draw me Spider-Man, draw me Godzilla, like specifically, I want you to take pen and ink and do a picture for me.
Mhm.
That's what am I like, maybe 20% there. I would say 20% is caricatures. Not that I do a ton of caricatures, but they pay better than anything else I do. So in terms of money wise, if I do a 4-hour job doing caricatures, that's like a lot of money.
Mhm.
I couldn't say. I won't say what I make, but I will say the average caricature artist makes about $100 an hour.
Mhm.
So I do a 4 or 5 hour job, I'm going to be making at least $400 or $500 that weekend. So even if that's the only caricature job I do in a month, that's not an insignificant amount. So over time, again, that's probably 20%. And I do some studio caricatures too, where I do it from a photo, and similarly, they pay better than a picture of Spider-Man or whatever. I find that people, their egos drive their willingness to spend. So someone is,
Yeah.
excuse me, much more likely to spend a lot of money on them as Spider-Man versus Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Uh,
that makes sense.
that's my advantage sometimes. So that's at like 40. Then I would say 30 to 40% is straight client work. And that could be a lot of different. It could be, animate a little thing for my business, website. It could be, design a album cover. It could be, whatever, just illustrate, mostly illustration. Like I said, not as much animation anymore, but just whatever random thing somebody happens to want, whether it's an individual or a small company that I'm still commissioned to do it, but it's separate to me because commissions are usually more fun and more of, I like Blue Beetle, draw me Blue Beetle, versus, hey, we're gonna have a back and forth and it's, you're a client with revisions and stuff. And the remaining 10 to 20% would be money I make at shows, selling my comics, selling prints, things like that.
Cool. And how about a time breakdown? And you don't have to go through each of those categories, but what do you feel like the time that you've spent on things aligns pretty well with?
No, that's with the money, you mean?
Yeah, with the money you're making. I mean, or is it disproportionately in one way or the other?
Completely. I spend more time working on my comic and prints and show stuff than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the least amount of money. It's comics specifically. To do a page of a comic, I'm slow. So different people have different things. But for me, if I take a page of a comic, I write it, I break it down. I do it mostly digital, but I pencil it, ink it, grayscale it. The only thing I don't do is lettering. But even that, I revise a little. That could easily take me 20 hours to do one page of a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And considering that comic will then be one page of 25 or whatever that I sell for $5, and it costs me $2 to print, I'm getting pennies for hours.
Right.
On the Going back to caricatures, I can do a black and white face of you in 3 minutes, and I could get $10 to $20 for that. So the art I spend the least amount of time on is caricatures, and that by far pays the best, versus comics, which I spend the most time in, by far pays the worst. Everything else is somewhere in between. So, when you get to more towards the middle, maybe I spend a couple hours on a client job or a commission, and I get money that's roughly commensurate with that. But on the far ends, it's way out of whack. I always say, like, I do caricatures so that I can do comics, basically.
Right. And I think I know at least generally the answer to this, but why is it that you spend the most amount of time on something that's making you the least?
Oh, insanity. I mean, why did any of us do it? I feel I've struggled a lot with what I am as a creator, like who I am, that kind of thing. Because when I was younger, I was a jack of all trades, master of none, and I still am to a certain extent. I got into photography. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be an illustrator. All this stuff, which I think a lot of creatives go through. And even now, I struggle with from time to time. I'm on YouTube like you, so there's an element of performance to it. But at the end of the day, I kind of came to the conclusion that I am a storyteller.
Yeah.
In the band, I wrote songs and stuff, but I was never writing songs about like partying or love. It was like stories, so whatever I'm doing, I like telling stories and introducing ideas and characters. And there's really no better way to do that as an individual than with comics, in my opinion. There's animation, movies, things like that, but you need a team.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up loving comics, is why I started drawing. And through this whole journey, I never stopped liking them. And even when I wasn't really working on them, I'd still doodle little Wolverines in the corner or whatever. And so when the time came to like really buckle down and say, hey, I'm getting older, what am I doing, who am I, it's like I should do a comic. If nothing else goes right the rest of my life, I could at least have this comic that I've made. And while it's hard, it doesn't make me any money. It gives me satisfaction. And it like, I have to do it.
Yeah, and I like that answer a lot. I feel like there's a misconception out there, and I think it stems from a number of things. But the misconception is that there's no money in art, and that's very not true. I mean, if you look around the world, literally everything that you see that isn't growing out of the ground has been designed or illustrated by somebody. Like every piece of media that you consume has been written or composed or acted or drawn or whatever by someone. Like there's money in art. I think one of the reasons that perception is out there is because art is much more important than money. It's much more important than the transactional aspect of it. We live in a world and in a society where we need currency to survive. But if I was in illustration for the money, my illustration would be completely different. Also, if I was in illustration for the money, I would probably just go get an MBA and start trying to be a CPA or something for somebody, because and I don't want to be one of those guys that's like, don't get into art for the money. But I also want to say, like, if money is your primary drive, that drastically alters what you're doing. For example, I'm in the same boat. I've spent the last 6 months, probably 80% of my art time is spent on this children's book. I have zero guarantee that I will ever make a dime on that.
Right.
And if I wanted my art to make 100% of my income, I would be playing that game a lot differently. I'd be chasing trends. I would be, seeing what movies are going to come out, and whether I liked the movie or not, I'd be doing fan art about, and like all that type of stuff. And so that question might have come off a little accusatory, and I didn't mean it that way. And I know you didn't take it that way, but I find that really fascinating, that drive to create something for the value of the creation. And if it brings success, and if it brings money, and if it brings whatever metric you want to, that's great, but that's secondary, ancillary to the reason that you made it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with, you said, I don't want to be the guy that says don't get into art for money. I understand why you don't want to say that, but I think that's a fine general statement to make. There's qualifiers, and it's a sliding scale.
Right.
But yeah, if you're like, I want to make money and be successful, don't get into art. There's easier ways to do it. And when you're an artist, if you're any good, and I don't even mean good as far as skill, but as good as far as motivation and trying to be a success, you're never off the clock.
Right.
After 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you're still thinking of stuff. You maybe go back to the table, you maybe read an article. On the weekends, you have time you're kind of always working, which can be a good or a bad thing. But if you're only in it for the money, that's terrible. If you're only in it for the money, then get a job where at 5 o'clock you punch out and you can relax for the weekend.
Yeah.
So, and it is a sliding scale, because there are people that, if you could be happy making money with your art, and if you like chasing the trends, there are people I see at shows all the time that are like, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is out. Here's my new set of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And they like it and they enjoy it and it's popular and they sell it and they probably make more money than me, and that's fine. And it's also fine to be like, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to do my own weird bubble creatures that no one's ever heard of. And these kind of, and then a lot of people like myself, I'm somewhere in the middle where I have my own book, but I also do fan art. But I do fan art that I like. I do Godzilla, Power Rangers, whatever, which may or may not be popular in that moment, but I'm not necessarily chasing the popular trend at that second. And again, there's no value judgment here. It all comes down to where you feel your comfort level of, am I making enough money and I'm happy the way I'm making the money? And this goes back to what I said about caricatures. If I really just want to make a lot of money, I know people that make a very good living doing caricatures. They do 2 or 3 parties every weekend, and they do studio caricatures, and this is all they do. And they have little mini companies, and they subcontract, and they're, half of a business, and they make, 3 figures doing that. And I could probably do that, but I don't really like doing caricature. I don't hate it. I mean, I've been doing it so long, it's super easy, but it's not satisfying. It's not fulfilling. And when I do the live jobs, people are like, you just seem like you're hanging out and talking. And I am. I'm barely thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just, my hand's like, there's your cartoon, And it's great in terms of getting an easy paycheck. But if that's all I did, I'd almost rather go be an accountant or something, And not to say caricature isn't an art form. And I have friends who are amazing caricaturists. But the way I do it, I'm a factory. I'm there to get money, So
right.
work in animation studios, and I loved it at first. Oh, I always want to be an animation. But then you're an animator on someone else's show. You're not writing it. You're not designing the characters. You're part of the assembly line, and there's a certain amount of glamour and fun that goes along with it, and camaraderie. But after a few years, you start to understand why the guy that's the lead designer is working on his own little project on the side. You start to understand why the director has a book he's writing, because no matter how fun or good this project is, it's not your own. And you kind of feel like you're not creating anymore. So you create something on the side, like your book or my book, not making money. Even if nobody sees it, you're at least expressing yourself in an authentic way that you want to express yourself. And it makes you a better artist overall, which is going to make your professional work better. Because I think most people, whether they want to or not, and I always try to do my best job. If you hire me, I'm going to do my absolute best to get you what you want. I'm a professional. But there's something different about when you're working on your own stuff. You're always going to try a little harder. You're going to experiment a little more. It's human nature. And you might learn something working on your own project that'll make you a better artist for hire. And it's cyclical. It goes around and around that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like a couple things that you mentioned were really important. One is having a side project or having a side hustle or a personal project, whatever you want to call that. That will always improve everything else in your life. There's one aspect of your life that it could be a detriment if you don't balance your time, where it could like destroy your relationships and stuff. But if you balance your time well, the rest of your craft is going to improve. But then also, I've hired a lot of people as an art director or marketing director before I started teaching. I was in a position where I was hiring people, and I was always way more impressed with the person who's like, here's what I've done professionally, and I do a good job. But then here's what I'm working on the side. And they're excited about something, because if you can get excited about and passionate about something that you are not required to do, and you spend a significant amount of time doing that thing that you're not required to do, I feel like that says a lot about a lot of different aspects of you and your personality and your work ethic and your, I know that I'm not going to have to force you to improve. I know that you're going to drive yourself to improve naturally, and on all of that. And then in addition to that, there's been a number of big name creators that I've heard in interviews that are like, I have still never made money off of X project, which is the first one that I did on my own. But because of that, I met this guy, or so-and-so hired me, or I got, it's almost like an extremely time-consuming and expensive business card.
Yeah, I've heard exact sort of things like you're saying, like someone does a fan film and then they get hired to direct a movie in that style, or, their own project doesn't get picked up, but like, oh, well, I like the way you drew the women in this. You want to draw Catwoman or whatever the thing is? And yeah, I've heard that exact same thing. Also, I've been to San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con a bunch of times. Usually, I don't have a table, but up until recently, I would always go to the portfolio reviews, and I kind of stopped because I started getting the same feedback, which is like, hey, you're pretty good, but we have no work for you. Like, I used to get more constructive criticism, like work on your perspective or whatever. And it got to the point where I wasn't getting as many notes, which felt good, but still nobody was hiring me because of whatever, my style, or they don't have a job. So it just kind of became a waste of time. But the last time I went is when I started having pages for the Horror 4. And previous to that, I had sample pages for, whatever company, or I had, other books I'd worked on, because I've been hired to do a couple comics by, small no-name publishers and stuff. And every single person that looked at those, the pages they liked best were the pages from the Horror 4, which was my own book. And I didn't make a point of like, I'm going to make these better than every other one, or, and some of them, the other work might have even been newer or contemporary, but I think it just showed that like that was my best. I was giving it my all. I was experimenting. I was doing everything I had to. And while, again, it didn't necessarily get me a job, I got a lot more compliments, and I did get a few tryouts here and there, and all the best reactions I got were based on my own comic pages of my own creation versus the standard ones I would do, or the ones I was hired to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell me, how did you start getting into conventions? What was, and I'll ask this in two ways.
English and French?
Yes, because I am that smart that I am multilingual. No. We've got a couple people in the chat. I just want to say hi to Ox and Peter.
And Peter, hello.
Hello. But yeah, no, I have a question. Like, for me, I'll tell just a quick story. For me, I have been to a couple cons. I helped with I helped with a project that I'm not allowed to mention publicly.
It's
That
always fun.
involves a mouse and some pirates, and that was at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was this big huge thing, and so I was able to go, but that was like before I had gotten back into art. It was 10 or 15 years ago, and
Wait, it was 10 or 15 years ago, and you still can't talk about it?
I don't know. I probably can. I'm just not sure.
Okay, all right, sorry.
But anyway, it's a large black pirate ship, and yeah. So but I was there to like look at that was back when I was into marketing and I was in like booth exhibits and stuff like that, and so I like created like award-winning booths and things like that. It was a total missed opportunity. I look back at that now. I didn't even know there was an artist alley. Like I was unaware.
Oh, wow.
I was just like, oh, look, media. I was just walking around, And
Yeah,
afterwards,
yeah.
my wife was like, man, did you see all those artists? And I was like, no, where? She's like, yeah, there was a whole row of them, and it was great. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I was working. But anyway, and then I got into comics again. I kind of fell out in high school and then came back in my late 30s. But and I was like, oh, Salt Lake Comic Con was starting. And so I went to like the first or second Salt Lake Comic Con, met a bunch of cool people. And then fast forward, I don't know however many years. Now I've finished a book and I kind of feel like I have to stop putting it off. Because I'm at the point now where it's like, you're going to fish or cut bait, And so I am in the boat right now where I wake up every morning in a constant state of terror that at some point in time soon I'm going to be sitting behind a table and people will walk up and tell me how much my stuff sucks, or worse, just walk by and not even look at it. And so anyway, so that's just my own existential fear of who I am in general. But what was the impetus to drive you to do your first show, and what was your first show like?
I will answer that, but let me just comment on what you just said real quick. No one will come up to you and tell you your work sucks. That will not happen. But people may ignore you. They may ignore you. That might happen.
Okay.
All right. So I'll answer in two parts because there are sort of two chapters to my convention life. Back in like the mid to late 90s, I did a couple shows, mostly small press shows on the East Coast. The first show I ever did was SPX, the Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland. And again, we're talking, I don't know, 96, 97. And I used to have a comic strip in a local paper, and I would make collections of it, and I would do fanzines and things like that. And so I did a few shows there, and I would literally just have a flat table. I wouldn't bring anything. I had no business cards, no name placard, no nothing. It was just a flat area that had like 20 copies of each of my books that I'd sell for $1 or $2 or whatever. And over the course of a weekend, I'd be lucky to make table, not including hotel, not including anything else. I would absolutely lose money. And I did this a few times, and I had no expectation of making money, and it was just exciting to be there. And then I kind of fell out of that scene. I was like, it was the indie comic, alt zine scene that was kind of big in the 90s that I sort of got into and then fell out. Then I didn't do shows for like 10 years. Moved to California, and my local comic shop, I became friends with the owner, and she is very Elusive Comics and Games. I'll give them a plug. And they are very supportive of independent artists and independent comics and the local people. And so she's like, hey, you're an artist. Why don't we do an art show? And I was like, but I hadn't been working on my own comic. I hadn't even really been doing prints. I'd just been doing commercial art, like work for hire stuff, characters, whatever. And I was like, I guess. And she's like, let's do it around October. We'll do like a Halloween thing. And I had just been hired to do a series of Something as Zombie. This was right before Walking Dead got really big. It was like right at the beginning of the zombie craze. So I'd been hired. There was a site called UGO, and they had hired me to do 2 rounds of, hey, do Mr. T as a zombie, do the Predator as a zombie, whatever. And so I did them instead of doing completely digital. So I knew this had the show coming up. I inked them and then colored them digital, so I'd have original art to sell. And then I'm not sure if I was allowed to make prints to sell, but I did. Now that it's been long enough, I'll say that. But like in retrospect, I was kind of new to it, and I'm like, I was hired to do this, and they were shown on the website, but I don't remember signing any. It was sort of a gray area. Should I have been selling prints? I don't know. But anyway, I made them. Went to the shop, and I sold them there, and I made, I don't know, $100, but it was free. You know, she didn't charge me anything. Sold a few copies. I made more prints than I needed to. I think I made 3 to 5 prints of like 10 to 12 designs, some of which I still have to this day. Like, it's taken me forever to get rid of them. Because after the show, I didn't have an online store. I didn't do another show. And it was just like whatever I didn't sell sat around forever. But that got me thinking, hey, I should maybe do some comic conventions and things like I used to. Because I, as a kid and as an adult, I went to tons of conventions. I went to comic conventions, horror conventions, sci-fi conventions as a fan. I've always gone to a lot of them. So I know that world really well. But like you, I didn't always think about the art section of it. You know, when I was a kid, I would go to comic conventions when it was in a hotel room and it was 99% people with long boxes and a couple, you know, toy tables and maybe one local artist sketching in the back. So I kind of didn't realize how it had evolved where you could get tables and stuff. So the first like real show I did was, again, about 8 years ago, maybe. It was called Big Wow. It's now called Silicon Valley Comic Con. And I got a table, and it was a similar setup. I had those same prints laid flat. I was offering commissioned convention sketches for way too cheap. I think I was charging like $5 for like a full body and pencil or something, which, considering how slow I am, is ridiculous. And it was everything flat on the table. And you know, people were nice. Again, nobody was mean to me. Some people ignored me. Some people looked at my stuff, and I did okay. But okay means like I barely made my money back. It was a local show, so there was no travel or anything. The table, parking, everything else probably came to like $100 and something, and I made like $100 and something. Maybe I lost $20, maybe I made $20, and that was the only show I did that year. The next year I did that show again, and I made like $40, and I did another small show where I made like $40. And this escalated over the last 8 years to the point where I'd say 4 years ago, I started doing closer to 10 shows a year, mostly local, with 1 or 2 where I had to fly or drive really far and maybe paid as much as $200 or $300 a table. My setup has evolved where, you know, I have things up in front of me that are, you know, utilizing the vertical space on the table. I had cubes behind me. I've since changed to the tripod thing, but you want to have stuff behind you, in front of you. I've changed my price points where I have, you know, $20 prints, $10 prints, $1 buttons. These are all things I've learned that giving options. And yeah, you can see here, that's new, lays out on top of the table. And then I also still do sketches, but I charge a more reasonable amount. And people like seeing you sketch as well. But by changing up my setup, changing up what I have to offer, and while I don't chase trends, I paid a little bit of attention of what sold of mine. I had a Ninja Turtle print that sold really well, so I did some more Ninja Turtle prints, not because the movie was coming out, but because it's something I enjoyed. And, you know, I test the waters a lot like that, where I did a GoBot, for example. Nobody wanted it. Okay, I'm not doing GoBots. You know what I mean? Like, I did a Transformer. A few people liked it, so I'll do a few more Transformers, you know, but it starts with what I feel like doing and then see what people react to. And for me, Godzilla, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles are the biggest things that I like that people respond to. So I keep adding to that. And every now and then threw a few other things in. And of course, now I have my comics and things like that. You can see my display here. I'm showing how I have it laid down flat, but then vertical as well, and the thing behind me. And I bring books. Some of the books have original art. Sometimes it's other prints because I have so many prints now I can't display them all. So it lets people flip through, and it creates a level of interactivity too. A lot of people look through the books. Doesn't mean they'll buy, but they look through my book and all my art. So what more can I ask? At this point, from like 3 or 4 years ago up till now, I generally don't ever lose money. It doesn't mean I'm making a ton of money at every single show, but if I make less than $100 at a show profit, I feel like that wasn't a great show. I've heard things, you know, I actually thought I've been ramping up and making more and more every year on average. Again, it's a small percentage of my income. It's not everything, but I actually got disheartened very recently. A couple of weeks ago, there's a podcast I listened to called 3 Point Perspective with Will Terry and Jake Parker and another guy whose name escapes me at the moment. But they were doing a show on like how much can you make as an illustrator and different things. And they started talking about shows. Now, they're mostly children's book illustrators. So this might apply more to the kind of stuff you do anyway, so which is good news for you because they seem to make a lot more money at shows than I do. And they were saying like, oh yeah, you know, students that do shows could make between $500 and $1,200 a show. And I'm like, what? Students? Like when I was a student, I was losing money or making $20. Like that's what I make now. You know what I mean? Like, and then they're like, and then once you've been doing it for a few years and you figure out what you're doing, you should be getting $1,200 to $3,000 a show. And then eventually, once you really know what you're doing, $6,000 to, you know, $30,000. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I think they're living in a little bit of a different world than I am, but it also made me feel like, am I doing something wrong? Because I feel like I've been improving and getting better. But you know, I'll be super transparent with you. I've had 2 or 3 shows where I've made a few $1,000s. Oh, and that was over the last couple of years. And those were amazing shows. Oh my gosh, I made $3,000. And I'm like, I've made it. And then the next show I made $200. So it's like, what's happened, you know? So on average, if I'm doing a medium size show that I don't have to pay hotel or anything like that, over a weekend on average, I'll make like $300 or $400 profit. Now that's after I pay for the table, that's after I pay for supplies, things like that, and that's not amazing because that means I'm getting about $200 a day, and these are long days because you're there for 8 hours, but you got to pack up and break down, and
Right.
so you're not making. I'm not making a good wage there now, and sometimes I make less, and I'm disappointed. Sometimes I make more, and I'm ecstatic. But I do come out at the end of the year several $1,000s richer than I would have been. But the bigger hope is that my work is out there. They buy my comic. Maybe they'll start following me on YouTube. They'll start paying attention to who I am. They'll buy a print later on down the line. They'll commission me. So very often I'll do a show, make a couple $100s, and it's not that great. But then 6 months later, somebody will buy a print. 3 months later, somebody will commission me to do a drawing or whatever. And so it's hard to quantify those sales and that money into the show, but I know I get more of them because of the shows. That being said, it's still not as big of a part of my income and my artistic, career as I'd like it to be. While comics is like the most important thing, it's very, very hard to make money on that. And I often say like profit on comics is almost zero. If
Right.
somebody likes your comic and they buy a print or a button or a shirt of your comic, that's where you make the money. And to illustrate this, when I do a show, let's say I do a show like I just said, kind of a medium, I make $400. If I am pushing my books, I'd probably sell more books. I usually sell between 2 and 5 books a show, average. And I've seen people who have their booth set up to just push their books and not be selling fan art or whatever else. They sell a lot more. Regardless of the quality or subject matter of their book, they're going to sell 10, 20, 30 because that's all they have. And I've thought about doing this, and it would work. I mean, I know it would work. I'd sell more books, but this goes back to the business and the money side of it. If I sold 30 books in a weekend, which is good for an unknown person, I think, I sell my books for $5 each. So that's $150, but I don't make $150 because they cost me about $1 or $2 to print. Let's say $1. $1 is the absolute cheapest you could get a book printed. Super cheap. So that means if I sell 30, I'm making $120. The average table is going to cost between $50 and $200. So I might not even make table, but even if it's 50, I've made $70 again for 2 full days of work, long, hard days.
Right.
If, however, I sell 30 prints, I sell my prints for between $10 and $20, let's say $15. So what's the math on that? $450, I think. And the prints cost about $1 each to make as well. So I'm making over $400 for the same amount of sales for prints. Even if my table costs $200, I'm still making $200. I split the difference and I sell prints and comics. So I make my money with the prints or pins or whatever else. And then hopefully I could sell some comics to grow my fan base and, get my stories out there. But I'd rather be selling prints of fan art than doing work for a corporation that wants me to design their logo. So it's a sliding scale, again, of how to make money and satisfaction. I would love it if I could just draw my comic all day and make a ton of money. I would hate it if I worked for a company where all I did was draw logos and made, whatever. So I've moved away from corporate art and caricature art somewhat, and I'm trying to put more energy into show and fan art so that could be my main income while I work on my comic. I haven't made it there yet, but that's the transition I've been trying to do for the last couple of years. And if anybody's been following me on social media, I have a show coming up, Power Morphicon, in a couple of weeks. It's a Power Ranger centric show they have every 2 years, and I've been going like a madman doing headshots of all the most popular Rangers, so that, again, partially because I want to be ready and partially whatever. But I heard this podcast. I've heard other people say this too. I have friends that have done San Diego Comic-Con and made like, $5,000, $10,000. And I'm like, how are you making, because they cost so much, but maybe I'm doing something wrong. So this is an experiment where I'm like, I am just going to do all these prints, and I'm going to go to that show with like 15 new prints. And I have a bunch of Power Rangers art, but 15 new prints of all the most popular Power Rangers. And let's see, will I come out of there making a couple $1,000s? Maybe not. And I won't be upset about it, but I was like, I'm just really going to try and see what happens. And if it works, then hey, maybe I can actually take some less client work and just do more cons than I even do now. That would be great. Would I rather do comics alone? Yes. But if conventions became my main income, I'd be pretty happy with that. So that's like, you're catching me right in the middle of like a new thing I'm trying. So
yeah,
I don't know.
And that's super interesting because for me, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to describe where I am in my artistic journey because on the one hand, I've been drawing for a couple years. On the other hand, I was a videographer, photographer, graphic designer, for a decade plus prior to that. And so it's not like I was starting from scratch.
Right.
You know, and so there's a lot of those skills that inform each other and all that type of stuff. And so, but when I jumped in, I started with a comic, and then I had to get my master's to keep my job. So I did that and got a master's at SCAD. And then when I came back, I was like very used to, you know, a web comic where I was doing all the pencils, inks, colors, lettering, and everything. I could get a page a week out, you know, because it was about the same as you. It was about 20 hours per page. Because I was also like learning to draw everything. I didn't know how to, you know, like, okay, so I have a person in this one. I've got to figure out how to draw people now, you know, so, you know, that type of thing. And then I get your master's. And if you've ever done anything post-grad while you're working full-time, it's an insane level of stuff. And so I came off of that and I was like, oh man, I need to do something. So I did 100 Days of Animation where I started a short film, and then I did the sticker stint after that. And then I did, and then I started this children's book. And that's like 100% of what I've done. And so I have finished one of those things. I have plans to finish the others, but it was one of those things where at the end of the 100 Days of Animation, I said, I wasn't aware how hard animation was, because I used that 100 days to teach myself how to animate. And I was like, oh, I'll just do like a short film, as if that's like something that you can just do in a 100 days. And you could if you knew what you were doing, and that's the only thing that you did. But I didn't know what I was doing. So I, at the end of that, had a couple scenes, animatics, and a couple like walking cycles. That was about it. And I realized that that's like a 3 to 5 year project. And so I was like, okay, what could I get done in like 4 to 6 months? And so I took on this children's book, which I just finished. And it took me about 6 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so now though, as I show up to this booth, I'm kind of in an interesting spot, because I'm not sure what to bring. And I've been watching you over the last couple of days. It seems like every couple hours I'm getting a notification of a new Power Ranger headshot, you know, and I'm like, oh wow. And he's like just busting this out. And so you're kind of in that mode that I was in during my sticker stint, where it's like boom, 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 boom. You know, you're just hammering these things out, and they look great. It's not like you're skimping on quality.
No, actually, it's funny. My wife asked me, she's like, have you found that you're doing so many of these helmets now? Are you getting faster? And I said, no, I'm getting slower. Because I said, I think I'm getting better. Like the 10th one I did is better than the first one. But if the first one took me 2 or 3 hours, this one took me 3 or 4 hours. So it's like, I'm getting slower. There's always that quality time versus efficiency thing. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, because going to a con, in my experience of never having been, but in going to a con, it's kind of like I've done other things where I was the brand manager for a line of ukuleles and electric guitars. That's such a great thing to be able to say.
Right? Yeah. And we did all kinds of weird stuff. Like there was this one time we were like, hey, we should come up with a new product. What do you think would happen if we put like a guitar pickup, like a humbucker, on like a kazoo? Like let's just do that, so that you could do like a kazoo through effects pedals, you know, or whatever. So we did all kinds of weird stuff. It was really fun. But like even then, where I had a very clear brand message, a very clear set of goals and expectations and everything, even then it's kind of a crapshoot of what to bring and what to show and how to display it. And so this, where like I want to promote my book, but I'm also looking at literary agents. I'd like to not lose money at the show, and it's like a $375 table.
What's the show that you're doing?
Salt Lake Comic Con.
Why was that an Artist Alley table, or did you get a booth?
No, it's an Artist Alley table.
And it's that expensive?
It's a huge show. I didn't even think I was going to get in.
I mean, I've heard of it, and I know it's a big show, but I am a little surprised that you did that for your first show, to be honest.
Yeah, honestly, it's a comfort thing. It's what I know, because it's the one I've been to in the last 5 years, and it's like
makes sense.
I live in the middle of nowhere, and so that's like the closest show to me. It's a 4-hour drive. But I don't know that there's another show within 6 hours of where I live.
Gotcha. I guess I'm lucky, because there's always a show going on near me. That's
Right.
makes
Yeah.
things.
And I mean, in Northern California, Southern California, it's a whole different ball game. But I mean, I live in a town where there's 30,000 people that live here. Half of them are students, and right now there's 15,000 people in town, and there's nothing for about 20 miles in any direction. There's not another
Gotcha.
like, and
Well,
so I'm
that
kind of in the
that could end up
wilderness.
translating to great sales though, because maybe the people I hear talking about all these amazing sales is because they live in places like you where they go to a show and it's the one show, so everybody drops all their money. Whereas there's almost a show a weekend by me, so there's
Yeah.
less incentive to spend. Whereas for you, it might be like this is the one show we're going to all year, so bring all your money. And so as I was saying, I'm surprised you chose that one. That might actually work out really well for you.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know. I mean, if it doesn't, I
Yeah,
don't operate on debt, so
right.
it's sunk costs, and I'll just chalk it up to tuition of life lessons learned. But I mean, that is where Jake Parker and Will Terry live. They live down in Utah. Um,
Oh, well, and those are the two people specifically I was quoting as having all that money, so,
right.
or potentially making all that money. I don't know how much money they have, but you know what I mean.
Right, and that's
Um,
where I met Ryan Otley, and who also lives down there, and all those guys. So there is kind of this weird little pocket of creators that kind of live in that
right.
area, but it is literally the only show for hundreds of miles.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this. Like with everything we've been talking about, everything's a sliding scale. And I feel like when you're going into a show, the two main things are, do I want to make money or do I want to get my work and my name out there? Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of other factors, but really those are the two things. And most people fall somewhere in the middle. I'm like 75%, I want to make money, 25%, I want to get my name out there. And that's sort of sliding a little bit. Um, I'm guessing for you, it's mostly about getting your name out there, but you said you don't want to lose money. So,
yeah. I mean, but I will say, if I do lose money,
yeah, you're okay.
but I feel like I've gained an
Notoriety?
audience, yeah, notoriety,
Sure.
or people know who I am a little bit more. Um, that's just an advertising expense. I
Sure.
would I don't know how this would work, because this would be a weird situation, but I could sell nothing.
Right.
And at the end of that, if I had more people subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter, and they know who I am and they're
Yeah.
invested in the things that I'm doing, I would consider that a very expensive advertising
No, I would
thing.
agree, and there's certainly value beyond the dollar to any experience and things like that that's intangible or unquantifiable or even quantifiable, but not by dollars. So I agree with that. And some people would not, and if you keep doing shows over and over and keep losing money, then at some point maybe you're not. But
Right.
uh, but let's talk about dollars and cents for a minute.
Okay.
And your setup. Forgetting about what your backdrop is or what your display is or any of that. Just tell me, what are you going to be selling?
Yeah. So, this is super helpful. I'm glad you asked that. I am planning on bringing stickers. So I don't have them pulled up. I can't pull them up on the screen right now, but I will in a minute.
Okay.
I've got a big file full of stickers that I've done, sticker designs. When I say stickers, I mean, because this is important, high resolution PNGs with an alpha transparency. So they could be kind of print on demand anything, but they don't have
Right.
backgrounds, right? And so as prints, as standalone prints, they're a little odd, unless I throw something behind them. But as postcards, they could work, and all that stuff. So the main thing I think I'm going to be doing is sticker packs. I'm probably going to bring somewhere between 20 to 40 different designs of
Right.
these stickers. I'll have some prefab packs where I group them up into categories, because I have little different weird little messages or whatever that I do in two or
Sure.
three different designs. And then I'm going to do postcard packs. I want to have one kind of really cool but fairly inexpensive kind of giveaway that I can just be like, hey, you want a free sticker, or you want a free postcard, or whatever that is.
That's a good idea.
And then I'm gonna do kind of 11 by 17 prints. For me, because I have two categories of illustration I do, where I'll do like heavy digital colors that it almost like loses the ink a little bit, and then I have just really detailed inks, and they're kind of two different styles. So like my sticker illustration style, that's something that I can knock out in like 2 to 4 hours on my iPad,
Right.
and they're more message based than they are like gonna wow you with the detail. And then the other style is
for example, I haven't seen them, but like a cartoon duck, and he's like, "Hey, let's have a nice day," or something like that, where it has something like literally a message with it.
No, I try to do more visual messages. I'll show you. Let me just pull this up. Well, I'll finish talking, then we'll pull it up.
Okay, yeah.
Then the other thing I was planning on bringing, so there'll be 2 types of posters. One is going to be 11 by 17 digital illustration. The other is going to be I have all of these pages where I've inked 40 pages of this book. Several of those spreads. This is weird to say out loud because it always like triggers my imposter syndrome. But several of those spreads would make for really beautiful prints.
Right.
You know, just the way that they're laid out. You don't need the text or the context of the story. It's just a really nice looking image. And so I'll have some kind of Inktober stuff and some pages from my book, and then I'll also have like digital colors. Oops.
You're gonna have original art pages, or you're just gonna make prints of the pages?
I will bring the original art, but because I'm still working with literary agents, I'm trying to land the right relationship. I'm not quite ready to let go of the originals yet.
Okay. Will you have any original art though? Maybe not from your book.
I did a Inktober a year or 2 ago, and some of that stuff isn't terrible, and I wouldn't mind bringing it and selling it. So yeah, there'll be some, but not many originals.
I agree with what Ox is saying. He says, do you have a portfolio book to hold those pages? Might be cool to flip through, which I agree. I see a lot of artists have like, here's the original art, whether it's for sale or not, and it generates interests.
Yeah, and I am going to get one of those little, just the little sleeves and throw in the original art. I was also thinking of, and I've got to talk to my local printer here, just printing off, seeing what it would cost to print off a dozen kind of perfect bound books, you know, because it's black and white, and so that brings the cost significantly down.
So do you not have a printed copy of the book for sale at all at this point?
No, I literally just finished it like last week. So
you're talking about almost doing like the kid's book equivalent of like an ash can.
Right, just like a dummy book type of thing that ash can would be a great way to do that.
I don't know how well that'll work as far as making you money, but if you want to talk to literary agents and things like that, you should definitely do that and not worry about the quality of the printing. But if I'm a publisher or I'm an agent and I can have a rough copy of your book to take with me, that's way better than having a business card. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it might be a financial investment that you may or may not want to make, but like I give out my comic all the time at comic conventions, and I'm losing money, but I'm like, oh, you work for IDW? Here's my comic. I just give them away like business cards. You know what I mean? So I know you couldn't do that with a fully published copy of your book, but if it is just like essentially photocopies and staples, why not? You know what I mean? Because you're not trying to sell them the book, you're trying to sell them the idea.
Right.
I would do that, yeah.
Yeah, and so those are kind of all the things that I'm thinking of. And then Salt Lake Comic Con also has a thing where if you've got a good giveaway or promotion to drive traffic to your booth, they've promised to try to promote as many of those as they can. So I'm trying to come up with some kind of giveaway thing.
Yeah.
I
mean, stickers and buttons are always fun. One time for a Wizard World, I did a thing because, like you said, I wanted to get promoted, and I said, "Oh, kids under 10 or 12, I'll do free head sketches or whatever." And I've done this at a few shows. Usually, if it's like, my local comic shop gives me a free table, I'll do it. Or like, if I'm getting a good deal, I'm more willing to give stuff away for free or give sales. When I'm doing a show that costs me $300 for a table, I'm less likely to give away free stuff, Yeah. But I did the thing, and it was sort of a mixed bag because I did get a lot of people come to my table wanting the free head sketches. Didn't necessarily translate into a lot of sales. A few people bought a pin or a print, but most of them is like, oh, my kid wants Spider-Man. Oh, my kid wants Optimus Prime. And, boop, 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 boop. And I'm pooping them out. It's not like super high quality work. I did little like index cards, so that it wouldn't be that big. And the kids were happy. And there was a line and it like looked good, but it didn't really translate into that many sales. So in retrospect, I almost would have rather given away pins or buttons where maybe, if the pins cost me 20 cents each and I give away 100 of them, I lose $20, but I wasn't spending all that time doing drawings where I could have been working with another customer or doing a real commission.
Yeah.
So I either one will work, but I've come to the point where I'd rather lose $20 than lose 2 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But all this stuff you talked about is good because it seems like you have different price points and stuff. Well, different sizes. You didn't actually talk about price points. Like, for example, the stickers, not the package stickers, but the individual stickers you're going to sell as well, or
Yeah.
only in packets. Okay, what are you going to sell your stickers
So
for?
my intention, because Josh Kimball was telling me about this, he used to do stickers as well, and he said he's never sold an individual sticker. He would price them individually, but he would charge $3. But if you buy in a group of 5, then you get 5 for 10 or whatever. So you save.
Okay.
You know, they ultimately turn out to like $2 a piece if you buy 5. And people are like, "Oh, for an extra $7, I get like 4 more stickers."
Sure. Deals always work that way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing I was thinking of doing. Is doing like a $3 individual or $2 and 5 or more.
That is not an unreasonable price for stickers. If you can find some way to sell something for $1, I would recommend it. I sell my pins for $1 or 6 for 5, and most of the time people get 6 for 5. And going back to the unpredictability of stuff, I did a Godzilla G-Fest, which is a Chicago Godzilla show I did a month ago, whatever. I don't know. Time is meaningless at this point. But I sold hundreds and hundreds of dollars in pins, which I normally don't. I always make some money on pins, but for some reason there was something there, and the dollars, like sometimes I was selling 6, sometimes I was selling, but a lot of times a kid came by with $1. A parent was willing to spend that $1. So there's something about the dollar price point. You got 3 kids, 3 pins, $3. You know, so I'm not saying your stickers are overpriced at all. It's a very fair price. But if you could find a sticker that's smaller, or a pin, or some way to sell something for $1, even if you're not making a ton of money on it. Like I said, on my pins, I think I make like 80 cents, 75 cents a pin, but it adds up. And there's just something psychological about the dollar price point that people will buy. And somebody will come by and talk to me about one of my prints or ask me a question, maybe not even be interested in my art or buying anything. But after talking to me, I'm like, you know what, let me get a pin as sort of like a tip almost, you know? So I always recommend to try to have something on your table for $1, if at all possible.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll have to think about that. At this show, it's a little weird, and I don't know whether they're going to enforce this rule or not, but they have, and I think this is the first year they've done this, they've limited it to 2D only, and they say you can't do pins or buttons. Because I'd do buttons all day long, and I love enamel pins.
Right.
But yeah, I like that idea of having something for $1. That's a good idea.
Yeah, if it can't be pins, whatever. But yeah, it's really about the price point more than anything else.
Yeah.
As far as your other stuff, like you said, you're going to have 11 by 17 prints. What are you going to sell those for?
I don't know. I mean,
what kind of paper are you printing them on? Is any of this stuff created right now?
No. The shows.
You got to get on that.
I know. I'm literally, we just adopted a kid, and so I was like out of it for a while, and then I came back, and everything has been hitting, and so I've been like playing.
How old is the kid? Can you put them to work yet, or?
No, unfortunately, he's like 4 weeks old today. So
so probably not good manual dexterity yet.
No, but he's really good at making it so that I can only get like 45 minutes worth of work done at a time. And then I'm interrupted for half an hour.
Gotcha.
Anyway, but yeah, so I'm way behind the 8 ball on that,
right.
On a number of those things, and so I got to get that printed. I like matte paper. I don't like gloss, especially for inks, and so I was thinking of just doing kind of like a medium weight matte, or a nicer watercolor, something with some tooth to it, or something like that.
I will say 2 things on this subject. One, with the watercolor paper stuff, I've gone back and forth and gone all around the mulberry bush with different types of paper. I find that most people buying, not all, do not care what kind of paper it's on. Mm-hmm. Some don't even care how good of an artist you are. Some are just like, I like ducks, that's a duck, I'm buying it,
Right.
But assuming they're slightly discerning and they like your art, most people will buy it because they like the image or they like your art and don't care about the paper. Yeah. Now that being said, there are people that get like laser photocopies that are like flimsy garbage, and I hate looking at them, and people pick them up and they're just flopping all over. And on the other end is I used to get watercolor paper, and it would cost me like $8 to print it, and I charge like $30, and nobody cared, and I was making less money and selling less. So I've kind of found the happy medium to be like a medium to heavy cardstock, which is more than most people care about, but it makes me feel good because I want it to be good, right. And I could usually get that with a nice bag and board behind it. That's the thing. You want to have bags. Definitely have bags. It seems really, I don't know, just unprofessional to not have something to put it in. It doesn't have to be, this, you could hang this on your wall kind of bag, but just something preferably clear so people could see the art. And I now start, actually, I have it here. So this is I knew I brushed over. This is like an 11 by 17 print I have,
Yeah.
and it's sort of on medium cardstock. You could hear that. It's fine. I think it's called satin finish. It's kind of matte. It's a little bit shiny, but not so much you can't take a picture of it.
Yeah, like a semi-gloss, but mostly lower towards matte.
Yes, and I always had plastic bags kind of like this that have like a self-sealing thing on top. But what I started doing is getting these boards. So what I do is I put it in with the board and the bag, seal it up, and now it not only keeps it looks professional. It looks like, hey, this is, they're buying a piece of paper that it's worth 50 cents, but they're buying the art. And by giving it a little bit more care and attention, I'm reinforcing psychologically, like, this is a piece of art. Treat this with care and respect. It was worth the money. Here's a nice bag and board like you'd get with a comic. And when they carry it around, it's not rolled up, it's not crinkled. People see this nice flat piece of art with a fitted bag. And I even tell them, you can hang it like this. Like, you don't have to get them as nice as mine are. But a lot of people, you fold this over, you can kind of just hang that on the wall as is.
Right.
You don't get a frame. But I used to sell this for $10. This exact print. I now sell it for $20. I sell it for less, but I make more money overall. And I use better paper. I give them better bags and better backing boards. So I'm making more money, but I tried to give them a little something back. Whether they care or not, I don't know, but I think it helps my overall image. And like I said, the professionalism and the treating it like a piece of art as opposed to a piece of disposable paper. I was going somewhere with this, but I forgot.
we were talking about different sizes and price points.
So that was the other thing I was going to say. So this paper, I've been, especially with time, I've been, again, erring more on the side of saving time. I can go to my local printer, I go get paper, I print it how I want, and I might save some money, and I might be able to print less or get it on demand. And I still do that. I'm probably going to have to do that before my upcoming show because I have some stuff that I don't have the art ready for, and I'm probably going to have to run to my local printer and get them done real quick. But most of the time now, I go through online printers. I specifically use Cat Print, not that I get kickback or anything, that's just who I use. And it costs a little bit more, mainly because of the shipping. The printing itself is not that bad, but you want to make sure you have a big order because you're going to pay $30, $40 in shipping. So you want to spread that out over hundreds of prints. But the advantage is, like, after I get off with you, all that art I've been working on, I'm going to upload them all to Cat Print, say how many I want, and forget about it. And then in 6 days, they'll show up. And I don't have to go out to the printer. I don't have to discuss anything. I can pick the type of paper I want. They have lots of different kinds. The other thing I've been doing, actually, let me see if I have it on this one. This is like the headshots. And again, you can see I have a bag and board for each size.
Yeah. Is that 8.5 by 11?
No, this is 9 by 6.
9 by 6. Okay.
But whatever. Oh, that's not. Actually, I didn't do it on that one. What I've been doing with my newer prints, as I'm getting them done through Cat Print usually, is you can print on the back too. And in black and white, I print all my social media info. You can see holding it weird. So I say, here's the front, here's the back. You could choose border, no border, how many you want, and the more you order, the cheaper it is. And then I sent it away, and it comes back, and I don't have to worry about it. And if I forget to give somebody a card or my information, they've got it right on the back of the print. So 20 years from now, if they look at that print, they could still hopefully find me. Even if that social media is not valid anymore, it's got my name on it. So that's another reason you're naming and branding consistent. But I will say I've made the mistake. I currently have 4 different sizes, which is a mistake. I have my 11 by 17s, which is a good size, a standard size. Then I have 9 by 12, which I started doing just because that's like a lot of times I draw at this size. Then I started doing the 9 by 6s for headshots, but I also have 8 by 8 headshots. 8 by 8's a more standard size, which is why I started doing these. But for these helmets, it just looked weird. Right. So this is the standard size, but I like the way it looks, so I was making – and that's also why I like to give people this thing so they don't have to worry about finding a frame if they don't want to. I'm going to try to phase out the 8 by 8s. I'm also going to try to not do too many more of these. The 9 by 12 is all my Ninja Turtle stuff. I think I'm only ever going to do Ninja Turtle 9 by 12. What I'd like to do is have all my prints just be 2 sizes. A, it avoids confusion, and B, because I have to get all the ancillary stuff like bags and boards and stuff. And right now I have 4 sets of bags and boards because I have 4 different sizes. And that's a problem I created for myself, that maybe you could avoid. Here's another thing with frames. I used to have, this is the 8 by 8. I used to always have them in these matte frames that I had to buy and glue together, and they were good for display, and I would sell them for a few bucks more. I also had like standard glass frames that I would bring because I used to work in caricatures, and at the booth, some of the money we'd make is selling matte frames and frames like that. And you do, but time to go get them and the weight of carrying them around, it ended up not being worth it. So over time I phased that out, and I feel like the bag and the board is a good compromise to where, again, I'm giving it sort of grandiosity of like, ooh, this is nice, without actually having a bunch of frames they have to carry around and or charge extra for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot. Yeah, so basically that's kind of what I'm doing is I've got some prints, I've got some, and I'm probably just going to stick to the one size, just 11 by 17. That's the page size that I ink at traditionally.
Sure.
You know, and I don't know, I might. My thing with doing it bigger than that is because that's such a common paper size that you can still get a pretty decent price at a local printer, but you go much bigger than that and they start having to switch to like their large format printer, which is always, you know, they charge by the square inch and it's like a ridiculous price.
Also, wall space. I have a lot of people, and I know this is true because it's true in my house, and I can see it's true in your house, come and say, hey, this is great. I don't know where I'm going to put it. You know,
Right.
like, give anything smaller. So if you make something too big, people might love it, might be willing to spend the money, and like, where am I going to put it?
Right.
So I do think 11 by 17 is the biggest and it's a standard size. You can get frames for super cheap. You can get it printed super cheap. I think most people doing, I would say don't charge less than $10.
Yeah.
I've seen people charge less, but again, it's sort of people will pay $10. That's a very common low price. And when people charge less than that, I think it's undervaluing, or they're like $10 each or 5 for 20 or some crazy. They do weird deals. We're like, what? Like, you know, why you do? And
Right.
often it's printed on thin paper or it's not their art. Like they're representing someone or whatever. I think $10 is the like sweet spot, bottom of the barrel. Like don't charge less than that. You could go more. Like I said, I charged 10 for years. I've only recently went up to 20. But again, I feel it works for me because I put in the extra effort, and it's kind of like with client work too, you know, going back to like freelance and making money. Time was I would take any job I could get for any amount of money, and I'd do 10 jobs that didn't pay well and I didn't really like them. Now I charge more and maybe I get 5 jobs, but they pay more. So I make the same amount of money, but I'm doing less work and work I enjoy more. And so it's similar where it used to be I was curating my clients. Now I'm curating my fan base, which sounds weird because I'm not trying to be an elitist. I want everybody to like my art, and everybody can look at my art for free. I put it up everywhere.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to own a print, you know, if they're willing to spend the $20, then they get a higher quality thing, and they want to, you know, support me or support that or whatever. I don't know. I found it worked better when I raised my price. I felt like things started working a little bit better for me at the shows. And again, I try to give back a little bit too. I'm not just raising the prices. I try to put more work into the art and more work into the materials and things like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I'll probably end up kind of in the middle there at like a $15 price point or something, and then
Sure.
multiples I'll give it to you for less, you know, figure out something like along those lines.
I will say this about the multiples for less. Obviously you're free to do whatever you want, but my sort of like rules for myself is two rules I have when it comes to discounts, because I sometimes do toy shows and I've done flea markets and sold junk, and I wheel and deal and whatever, but it's different for art. I try to keep art. I'm not selling a bunch of old tires. I'm not selling some old toy, you know, like there's
Right.
an intrinsic quality and value to it that is more than I want to get the junk out of my garage. So I'm not against sales at all, but the two things I would say is one, and this I feel strongly about, not everyone would agree, and I don't think it makes you a bad person if you don't, but one, if you have a sale, have it from the beginning of the show to the end of the show.
Mhm.
Don't have a sale Sunday night. I think that's crappy because somebody could be there, buy it from you at full price, then suddenly Sunday you have them at half price. They feel like they made a mistake, got ripped off. A lot of people do
Right.
it. Doesn't make them bad people. But having gone to shows a lot, I've been on the other side of that. Like I paid $20 for that Saturday, supported them. And if I had just waited, you know, so
Right.
if I run a sale, it'll be different from show to show. But if I run a sale at that show, it is the same beginning to end for everybody. Just to keep it fair. I'm a big believer in fairness, and so like that you know. The other thing is, I've found this is less about fairness and more about practical business stuff. I found that rather than reducing price, offering more for the price works out better. For example, if I said, okay, this show I got a free table and it's a local show, I'm going to offer everything half price. I'll end up making less money than if I say buy one get one free.
Mhm.
It comes out to the same where if I sell my prints for 20, I'm still getting 10 per print. But if somebody says half price, I'll get one. Now I get $10. Buy one, get one free. I'll get one. Now I'm getting $20. So they still get the same price point, but I get more money, if that makes sense. Just by offering more, I don't want to de-incentivize them to spend money. I
Yeah,
want
that
to
makes
give them
sense.
more for the money they're spending. So the first one is a sort of an ethical thing I believe in. The second one I think is just good business.
Yeah. Well, the first one's also good business because there's a because came through. I came through education differently than a lot of artists, and went into business for a long time and marketing and things. And the reason this is the only reason, and they've done studies on this, and there's all kinds of stuff. The only reason people spend money, there's only one reason, and it is how it makes you feel at the time of the purchase. So if I am buying art, I'm buying art because of the way it makes me feel at the time of the purchase. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't utility or value after the purchase, but the reason that I spend the money psychologically, the reason I buy a piece of exercise equipment is because I want to feel like I'm about to exercise, right? I want to feel like I'm doing something positive in my life. The reason that I buy something is because of the emotion of it. And so there is an emotional investment in every purchase that you make. Mm-hmm. And from a business standpoint, if somebody invests emotionally in your brand and then you betray that by screwing them after the fact, because if on Friday they buy something, for $20 and then they see it a couple days later and it's you and it's the same thing that they just bought, for $7 because you're trying to unload your inventory, you've actually betrayed the emotional trust that they've given you. That is a longer lasting feeling than the initial purchase. Whereas if you reinforce that, then it could actually strengthen that relationship and it could grow. And so that you said kind of what I said, but much better. Well, but it's true. I hadn't thought about it until you said it. But
it is true though too, because if I have people that are return customers, I won't necessarily give them a better price, but I might be, hey, take a free button, hey, take a free sticker. You want a little I'll again give them a little bit more for their attention. Ox is saying that you should consider doing a pre-order like what I had done for my last show, which was the first time I did it. And it actually worked out pretty okay, where I did the art for a print, had it ready to go, and said, hey, I'm going to go do this show. Normally, if somebody buys a print from me, I ship it out within 2-3 days. I said, you won't get this for a month, but I'm selling it for half price. And I didn't sell a ton of them, but it basically helped fund the print run. So all the money I got up front, I was like, now I'll put the print run in. And then I had these prints essentially for free. They weren't for free because I had to, fill it. But after the show, I then sent out the prints to everybody. So they got them a little bit later, but they got them half price. But it was like almost like an investment. They got it for half price, but they had to wait a little longer. And it made sure that I could print, 10 copies or whatever without any risk to myself. Yeah. And so Ox is suggesting you do something like that. I don't know if you'll have time to. Well, actually, you will, because if you make it clear you're not going to fulfill for a month or whatever, you got to meet your deadlines, as you know, even if it's to individuals versus a client. That's another thing I feel very strongly about. But as long as you're meeting that deadline, then say it's going to be a month, you get it for half price. That could take a lot of the financial pressure off you too. And then what was the other thing you were just saying about the prints, blah, 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 return customers. Here's the other thing that we haven't talked about much when it comes to social interactions. You said you were kind of nervous that people were going to maybe, make fun of your work or not like it. Again, I've never had that happen. People might ignore you. That will happen, but not in a nasty way, but just like, let's keep moving or whatever.
Right.
But there are going to be a lot of weird social interactions. Some will be pleasant, some will be not pleasant, but I don't know how comfortable you are with people. I mean, you seem very personable online, but I've never dealt with you in real life in like a crowd or whatever. I worked a lot of retail jobs. I worked at theme parks. I've been in improv groups. I've been in a band. I'm super comfortable in front of people. I like being the center of attention. Yeah. Not everyone does. You don't have to be the showman. And a matter of fact, sometimes it's bad if you're like, hey, step right up and get my comic. But it's annoying to be next to that guy. You know what I mean? Like, you have to strike a balance of being confident and engaging people, but not being overly loud and that kind of stuff. So have you, like, what I always come back to the retail thing. Like, I didn't realize it at first, but I realized how well it serves me, the retail theme park thing, where like, if somebody is sort of within eyesight and catches my eye, or I see them looking, and I'll just give them a nod or like a, hey, that's it. If they approach the table, get a little closer, I might then be like, hey, having a good day, like your t-shirt. I won't say, hey, do you like what you see? Let me tell you about my comic, anything like that.
Yeah.
Then if they're there for a little while, they're flipping through stuff, I'll say something like, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. I see you like Godzilla. I have some more Godzilla in this book that isn't up on there, no pressure to buy, but, just kind of give them a little bit of information. Right. And that's, I'll kind of leave it at that and let them lead the discussion from there. But you kind of need to balance engagement and attention with overbearingness, you know. And sometimes I'll even, after I've had those interactions and they're still kind of hanging around, I don't want to just sit there staring at them. So I'll be like, all right, let me doodle something, or let me pretend I got to get some bags, or just find a way to not be staring at them, but still be accessible to them. And a lot of people have a hard time with that balance. A lot of times, unfortunately, you know, I think people are getting better as shows have become more and more popular, but a lot of times the two extremes you see is the carny barker, which everybody hates, including other artists, or like the emo introvert, where they're just sitting there drawing in their book and not even looking up. And that's equally bad, because then people don't want to approach them, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just something to think about. And that's just for everyday normal interactions. But then, you know, I always say this, and I try to be careful because I'm not trying to insult anybody or shame anybody, but there are people that you see at shows that might be differently abled in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be sensitive to that. And I don't mean like, don't make fun of them, because if I have to tell you that, you're a terrible person anyway. But, I mean, it's, you have to be ready for it, is all I'm saying, because I've seen people that do their first show or two and someone comes up and they have social anxiety issues, or, you know, some other sort of, you know, differently abled person again. And if you don't know that that's going to happen, you might handle it badly or be surprised or whatever. And it's not always obvious either. You might get like 2 sentences into a conversation and be like, what is happening here? And mostly they're regular people that just, you know, see the world differently or have their own challenges. Sometimes though, it could get weird, you know. It could get.
Give me a for example.
Fetishes, sexual fetishes could come up in uncomfortable ways.
Oh, interesting.
Political discussions could come up in uncomfortable ways. Like when I'm at a show, you know, some artists are political. I try not to be political or religious or sex or anything like that. That's not what I'm selling. That's not what I'm about. That's not what I'm interested in talking about when I'm being an artist at a show.
Yeah.
And I think that served me well. But sometimes people will come up and engage me on a subject like that, assuming sometimes views that I share, sometimes views that I don't share. But anytime it happens, they're assuming I agree with them usually, and it'll be loud about it. And I'll be like, and I'll just sort of smile and nod or be like, well, I don't want to talk about that here or whatever, you know. That's uncomfortable because, again, of the subject matter. But I've also had it where people like want to commission me, and it starts off like a normal commission, like, oh, it's this woman with psychic powers that I created. Okay, well, tell me about her. Oh, well, she's also got, you know, huge feet that are like 2 feet long, and she could turn you into a baby, and but you kind of like it, and it's like, what has happened? And this is a literal example, and I did it because I needed the money. Now I wouldn't, but at the time, I'm like, well, I guess it's $20, you know, like, but like, and it wasn't. And here's the thing, I don't care about people's fetishes. Like, if you're not hurting anybody, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not a prude, but I don't necessarily want to be part of it. And I used to think I could separate, like, well, I could draw it, but I've had things where like, okay, you tell me what you want, and then they stand there like watching me and like breathing heavy while I'm drawing, and I'm like, I don't want to be part of this. I don't. I'm too much in your world right now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm happy to do the, you know. So, or there's other people that are just kind of, again, like socially awkward, where they want to talk to you, like whatever your thing is. Like, they'll talk to me about Godzilla, and I like talking about Godzilla, but they'll just that kind of stereotype of like, I'm going to recount all the details from this movie. And remember when he did this? And remember when he did this? And then this happened. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, I saw that movie. It was great, you know. And then they keep going, and it's like, okay. But meanwhile, other customers are coming, and you have to kind of politely smile and nod. And I've had people do stuff like try to come around behind the booth to look at the prints. I'm like, you can see them from there. You can see them from there. It's okay. And they're like, oh, it's okay. You know, or one person was talking to me so long, then they left, and I was like, okay, cool. And then they came back with a chair and sat down in front of my table. I'm like, can you not sit in front of my table? You know, so it's, again, you just have to be ready for these sort of situations and deal with them tactfully and diplomatically, because no one is served by you being like, what the hell? You know? And this doesn't happen every show all the time. But every show, there's at least one unusual encounter with someone. And you just have to be ready for that, and have your diplomacy skills ready and your defusing skills ready.
You have no idea how much more excited I am now. I don't know why, but I find awkward situations to be just infinitely entertaining. And I think it comes back
you might
to, like,
have a good time then. But again, most of the time it's fine, you know, but sometimes it does get a little weird.
Right. And I think that's in my experience, anytime you come across more than 10 people, you're going to come across somebody who's very, very different than the majority of people, just because everybody's got a quirk or whatever. And so where you're at a show, and I don't think this says anything about any particular fandom or genre or style of media or whatever. I think it's just when you have a large group of people, you know, and everybody's interacting, you're gonna get, I had not thought of that at all. Now I'm just really excited. I love it because I teach, and so I have students, and there are times where I just have to inwardly smile because you can't do it. And I don't want to like mock people, right? And
no, of course not.
But there'll be somebody who makes a comment in class, and I have to like just kind of acknowledge that they participated, not condone what they just said without condemning what they just said, and then I'm just like, and I have to just move on. But those are the stories that I get to tell later, and I love telling
those skills will serve you well, though. Those skills will serve you well at the show for sure, sure. Similarly, and this won't happen to you right away, but having done as many shows I have people that are return customers or people that don't buy from me that just come and talk to me again, and some of them I remember, some of them I do not.
Right.
I don't have a great memory. I meet a lot of people. I meet thousands and thousands of people every year in various ways, like through work at conventions, character stuff. And so some people I'll remember like, oh, you bought the thing at the other show. But I've also gotten in the habit of, and this is just in life, but especially at shows, somebody comes up, hey, what's up? Hey, man. Like, and I just treat everybody like I know them and they're my friend, which isn't a bad way to be anyway. Right. But like 10% of the time, that person knows me, from a show or somehow. And if I was like, who are you? I don't remember you. It gets confused. It might be offending to them. Like, how do you not remember me? Because to them it was a big deal. They met me. I did a Power Ranger art from 3 years ago that one time, but they were one of 10,000 people I did that for. So I don't remember. And also sometimes it gets like awkward, like, because I used to try to really be like, where was this? Silicon Valley. Oh, I kind of, and even if I can remember them, it was like such a long road to get there that I usually just keep it casual and friendly and act like I know them. And sometimes throughout the conversation, I'll figure out where I know them from. Sometimes not. But whatever, I'm just going to be nice to everybody. It's easy, like. Yeah.
I had the opposite experience when I first graduated college. I got a job in video production, and I was an editor, and so I did a lot of other things, but I would edit a lot of videos. So other people would shoot these interviews, and then I would spend 20 hours editing this down to a thing. I'm staring eye to eye to this person who's like on my screen or whatever.
Right.
Your body interprets that as like a very intimate connection with that person. Like, know them really well. They've literally never met me before in my life. And then I'll see them on the street or something. And I'll be like, hey, man. And they're like, what? And I was like, oh, yeah, sorry. No, so I stopped doing that because it only happened once or twice before I realized this is going to be a thing as long as you have this job.
Right. Well, and that's true. Even without that job, when people listen to podcasts or watch YouTubers or whatever, you definitely get a feeling of intimacy. There are people who I've listened to or watched that I've never met, never even interacted with online, that I've seen them at a show and be like, hey, and I know I don't know them. And usually they're like, hey, we're from the show. But it's like they don't, for me, I'm like, that's that guy I've watched once a week for 2 years. We're buddies, but we're not, and I've had it from both sides too, to a lesser extent because I'm not as popular as them. But like I have had people. And it is weird because you don't know what to say when somebody comes up like, oh, I watched your video. And it's like, cool, thanks. And I can see because I'm them that they want to be like, so how you been? Or what, but really there's nothing more to say. And I've been on both sides of it. It's just a weird product of the world we live in now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really an interesting thing. Well, that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we've been going for a while. Is there anything that we haven't covered regarding the show that you want to cover before we get to the end here?
Yeah, I was actually going to say I promised you I'd keep this to an hour, and we're at an hour and 20 now, so we can start wrapping
That's
up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we covered like prints and sales, and I mean I've already talked to Scott Circland and a bunch of other guys and stuff, and so
to bring a tablecloth and a bottle of water and gum, and a snack.
A bottle of Purell. Yeah, I was on Twitter the other day, and every once in a while Sean Gordon Murphy comes out and he's like, hey, I've got 15 minutes, so I'm waiting for this thing. Ask me some questions. And so I asked him, and he said, healthy snacks and a bottle of Purell. And I said, okay, good. So
I've actually never bought Purell. It's good advice, but I just wash my hands, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I always hear the con crud.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I have a pretty good immune system. I don't get sick that often, I think is what it really comes down to.
Do people shake your hand a lot? Is that what's going on? Or?
Well, I don't know what a lot is, but more than regular life. You know,
Right.
I mean, it sometimes somebody buys something from you and they want to shake your hand, but even more than the fan slash customer, other artists when you're walking around. Oh, hey, you doing?
Oh,
Oh, how you doing? You know, oh, you're in publishing. Blah blah blah. So there's a lot of like networking handshakes kind of thing. But yeah, I think in my normal life, if I have one handshake a week, that's a lot. At a
right,
con, I'm gonna have a few at least. So more. And I think just like kind of like being on a plane, the concentration of people and stuff. But
right.
Purell is good advice. It's just one that I don't happen to follow myself, but I haven't been hit with the con crud. So maybe once I do, I'll start bringing Purell rather. What was the other thing? Purell.
So let me ask you
Yeah,
this, because you brought something up, and I think we can wrap it up with this, because this is really
sure.
interesting. With my goal mainly being just exposure. I hate that word, but like
Yeah,
more, building a fan base,
sure.
and getting my professional work out there. You mentioned networking. Like, how does that work? Because I've watched your videos. I mean, do you just like
I'm not good
leave?
at networking.
But I
I'm
mean,
not good.
I see everybody do this. Do you just leave your table and nobody
Yes.
steals stuff?
Yes. I mean, that's the simple answer, but I used to do shows with my wife or a friend, and I still do sometimes, but more often than not, I'm by myself. The main networking I do is you get to know your two neighbors, your two table mates, or whatever you want to call them, the person to the left and right. My experience is usually that one of them ends up being the normal, nice one, and the other one is like, okay, you're also here, because just like the people out there, some of the artists are not either,
Right.
compatible with my personality or, interested in talking to me or whatever. But what I
or
generally will
or
do
or
is,
used to interacting with other people, since we
sure,
spend the majority
yes,
of our lives in our studio.
right, yes.
Yeah.
So, but usually one of your neighbors is, on the level that you could talk to them and trust them or whatever. I mean, everybody's usually trustworthy.
Right.
Because here's the thing. Um, if you're bringing artwork, you're usually not going to get stolen from anyway. If you have a bunch of rare comic books from the Golden Age, if you have a bunch of toys, somebody might steal that. But if I have a stack of Godzilla art that I did, maybe somebody will steal one because they like my art and they're cheap. But that's weird because usually stealing from an artist, it's like the difference between when I was a kid, I used to shoplift. Not
Hmm.
proud of it, but I shoplifted a
Sure.
lot. I never ever would steal a dime from a person, but I would steal from
Right.
Walmart all the time.
Right.
There's a moral line that a lot of people have. I certainly had it where I'm like, I'm stealing from a company. I'm not hurting anyone, even though I am, but you know what I mean? But if
Right.
I stole $1 from you, I wouldn't be able to sleep. So I think it's the same thing. Whereas if somebody comes in, oh, they got a bunch of He-Man figures, I'm going to steal He-Man. It doesn't feel the same as stealing art from an artist. It's like you're stealing from a person, especially if you like their art. You're stealing from a person who you kind of like because you like their art. So that, I mean, it can happen, but it seems like such a weird crime. The other side of it is I'm going to steal a stack of art and then do what? Sell it? It's not worth anything except
Right.
to me, the artist. Where are they going to sell it? At a table down there where so
Yeah.
the things that might get stolen are like I have Copic markers. I bring them home with me because my box of Copic markers is a couple $100 worth of art supplies. That
Right.
might get stolen. If I have, a money box or whatever. Some people have money boxes. I keep my money in my pocket, to be honest, because I figure if I'm going to get robbed, you're going to have to, beat me up for it then, So, but the actual artwork itself, I don't really worry about getting stolen. I'll usually tell my neighbor, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. Can you watch it? Or I'm going to be back in a half hour. I'll put a little placard up, back in a half hour, and I'll do a quick walk around, talk to somebody I want to talk to, buy a thing I want to buy, whatever. And depending on how busy the show is, I might not leave my table at all. If it's busy, 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 I might leave once to go to the bathroom. That's it. If it's slow, I'm more likely to walk around. And then what'll happen is my neighbor will, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a walk too. Can you watch my stuff? And sometimes it's just literally, hey, they'll be back in a little while and they don't sell anything. But if you trust them enough, you could say, these are all $10. If you want to take the $10 for me, thanks, so, but it's communal, as much as it's awkward and artists are weird and people are weird, it's very communal. There's not a lot of theft at art shows.
Yeah.
And again, if you're Ryan Otley and you got original Invincible pages, yeah, somebody's going to steal that. You know what I mean? But if you or me, who's going to steal the prints of our indie books,
Right. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
you got an Invincible page up there or something?
I do. I have two of them. I've got a sandbag on my camera, but there's,
Okay. Well,
there's some Invincible pages right there. Those two.
I believe you. Well, but that's my point. But that is something that has value that somebody could then turn around and sell on eBay. If somebody
Right.
stole something of mine or yours, they'd be lucky to get what we sell it for. Because half the reason people buy from us, and this is an unfortunate truth, they like the art, they like the subject matter, but usually they like us. I've definitely made sales because someone talked to me and liked me and they're like, you know what, I'm going to buy your art, you know? So if someone's selling it and they're not even the artist, it's just not something I worry about. Again, I'll take my Copics with me. I'll take my money with me, but the art stuff, you know, and I'll leave it there overnight. You know, so you could throw a extra tablecloth on top of stuff just to like, you know, whatever, but I've never had a problem with that. And I don't know anybody that has. Again, money being stolen or something like that, sure. But artwork from like an indie artist, no, it's not a thing.
Well, that's great. Any closing thoughts, and then I'll let you. I'll give you a minute to kind of plug where you want everybody to go.
Closing thoughts: have flat, vertical, and high up. You know, so different eye lines could see it. Have different price points from $1 up to however much. If you have original art, if you have a painting or something you've done for like $500, bring it along. You never know. Have something you could give away that is not your business card. Have a business card, but I used to give away my business card all the time. And it's great for literary agents, other artists, things like that. But people would be like, hey, I like your art. And I'd give them my card. And then I'd get text messages from them or emails from them. And they'd be like, hey, I met you 3 months ago. I'm going to be like, what? You know? So now I have a card. I don't have it one handy, but on the front is the artwork for my second issue. And on the back has all my social media. So I give out, you know, my YouTube, my Etsy, my Facebook. I have a separate Facebook page for my artists as opposed to my personal one. I give all that information out. And so I'll give those out. If somebody buys a print, if somebody's interested, if somebody's walking by, I give them out like candy, but they don't have my personal email and phone number. That's only for people that are in the industry. What else? Have supplies, be friendly to everybody. I don't know. I think you pretty much got it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so where can everybody find your stuff?
Well, I am Gazbot online just about everywhere. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Etsy, Instagram, Facebook. I have a Twitter, but I don't really use my Twitter. I have a Tumblr, but I don't really use my Tumblr. I'm Gazbot pretty much everywhere. And then the next 2 shows I have coming up in about a week and a half, I'll be at Power Morphicon in Anaheim near Disney World, which is the biggest Power Rangers convention there is. I'll be selling my Power Rangers art, of course. I might cosplay if I have time, so that might be a thing to see. And then the week after that, I'll be in San Francisco for Godzilla Night at the Balboa Theater, which is a obviously Godzilla themed event where I will have art of Godzilla and other things.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, and
thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great. And you guys know where to find my stuff. It's down here. There it is, right there. CoryKerr.com and all that jazz. Stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, hit that bell. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram, because these 3 places, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, I will be announcing what I'm going to do, and whether you can get to the show or not get to the show. I'm going to have a bunch of products to move. So if you like prints and stickers and postcards and all that jazz, there's going to be something for you. So
awesome.
Thanks a lot, guys. And thanks everybody in the chat. You guys rock.
Chat.
Fairly active chat. So it was rad. Okay. We'll catch you guys later.